Yeah, good. We can have a 1 minute of silence. So, good evening, dear friends here in Asia, and good midday in Switzerland, from where Dr. Tho is talking. So, I am really very happy to welcome you, Thai, Dr. Tho, and I'm also happy to see some faces here. I guess there will still be a few more. We have Chun and Xiao Yu from China. And most of the people already have put their country also in their after or before their name. That's fine. Thank you very much. I think you have all read the invitation and know more or less who is speaking to us today. This is in the context of the World Goetheanum Association. This is actually a community of entrepreneurs, or in other words, sometimes people ask me, is this all about biodynamics, or is this about pedagogy, if we do something about pedagogy, And the thing is, when I found a school, when I teach a school, when I direct a school, I also have entrepreneurial elements in there. When I farm land, when I have a shop, always I have entrepreneurial, I could also say artistic, free elements in there. And that's what the World Goetheanum Association is about. Because some people a few years ago discovered that actually decision-making changes the course of the world. So, our decisions, our entrepreneurial decisions, are influencing how we live, how the world develops. And that is why it makes sense to bring people together who are taking decisions, to think about how can we work together and how can we change things to the good. This World Goetheanum Association is very much anchored in the belief, that we also have in the topic of today, from inner transformation to social change. So social change obviously must be anchored, must be based on inner transformation. And we have seen that in the history of the world very often. If we only want to change the outside, things can go badly wrong. So very, very happy to have you here. Thank you very much. And I hand it over to you, Dr. Tho, already.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. Let me just briefly say a few words about myself, and then I'll make a presentation for about an hour or so, and then we will have time to hear your comments or questions or have a conversation. So just to put my biography in the context of the World Goetheanum Association, so I actually started my studies by studying Eurythmy in 1970 in Dornach, so that's a very long time ago. And then I was a Waldorf teacher in Germany in a big Waldorf Steiner school called Engelberg near Stuttgart. And then for many years, I was in a Camphill in Switzerland, Perceval. And as it is in Camphill communities, so I don't know if you're all aware of Camphill communities, there are communities where we live and work with people with special needs. It was founded in 1940 by Karl Koenig, who was a pediatrician and a disciple of Rudolf Steiner. And these communities have then spread all over the world. And I've lived in such a community for over 20 years with my family. And I used to be in Camphill, usually you do many things. So I did many things. I was eurythmist, curative eurythmist. Together with my wife, we had a house for adolescents, especially adolescents within the autistic syndrome. And we also had a school for special educators, so Camphill Seminar, and I was the director of that seminar. And then after over 20 years in Camphill, I moved to the International Committee of the Red Cross. I was the director of learning and development within the ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, working mainly in war zones, conflict areas all over the world. And from there, I moved to Bhutan as the program director of the Gross National Happiness Center. So it was a very diverse kind of career, or more than a career, really biography. And I came back from Bhutan in 2018. And we had a foundation in Vietnam for many, many years. We started in the late 90s called Eurasia Foundation. We started in the field of special education. We spread from that in many different aspects like education and ecological project and so on. And then I created the Eurasia Learning Institute for Happiness and Wellbeing, which with the intention to sort of share and spread and develop projects based on all the experience that I've had, both in Camphill and also especially in Bhutan. And today I will focus my presentation more on the gross national happiness concept from Bhutan, which is one of the foundation that I'm working with. And now I will share my screen and show you a presentation. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen with the presentation? Yeah, okay, good. So the theme is from inner transformation to social change. And sorry, when we speak of gross national happiness, the first question that comes is, yeah, but what do you mean by happiness? And happiness is such a personal, such a subjective thing. So how can happiness be a kind of a guideline for public policy or education or business? If we, because most people assume that happiness is something very personal and subjective, and how can you learn it? How can you measure it if it's something so subjective? So the first thing is to clarify what we mean by happiness in the context of gross national happiness. And the idea that happiness is a very central dimension of human life is not something really new, because already Aristotle, like about 2,500 years ago, said happiness is the meaning and the purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. And you find similar views in the Asian tradition, for instance, in Buddhism and other Asian traditions. So it's something that doesn't belong only to one culture, but that you find in many different traditions. The idea of happiness as a very central dimension to human life. But then what happiness are we speaking about? We are not speaking about pleasure. We're not speaking about superficial, emotional, emotions that come and go the way emotions do. We don't speak about feeling happy. We're speaking about being happy. And that's something quite different. And in the Greek philosophy, there was a difference that was made between two concepts of happiness. One was hedonia. The word hedonism comes from that, meaning pleasurable experiences, the quest for pleasure. And that's obviously very individual, very personal, and also always short-lived. And then eudaimonia. And eudaimonia in the ancient Greek means beauty or harmony. And daimon is not a demon, but is our higher being, our true self. And so it means living in harmony with our true self. And so the kind of happiness we're speaking about in the context of gross national happiness has to do with eudaimonia, not with hedonia. And a way to summarize it is, and we've done a lot of research on it while I was in Bhutan, even before that also. And we try to summarize it in this way. The three components of true happiness are, first of all, living in harmony and knowing how to care for oneself. So living in harmony with oneself, caring for oneself in the sense of that our life and what we do in the world is an expression of our higher self, of our highest potential. And that we also take the time to reconnect with our highest potential. And so living in harmony with ourselves is the one central, fundamental component of what we mean by happiness, so that our life is a manifestation of our true self. And the second dimension is living in harmony and caring for others and for society. And this also has been researched a lot. And we know from a lot of research evidence that the quality of human relationship is the one strongest factor that correlates with well-being, with mental and physical health, and even life expectancy. So the quality of human relationships, friendship and love, and feeling well integrated in a community, whatever community it is, but being part of, is the second dimension. And it's not only about me receiving from the community or feeling integrated, but it's very much having the feeling that I contribute in a meaningful way to society or to my community, to my organization, to my family, whatever community we're speaking about. So that's the second component, living in harmony with others, caring for others and for society. And the third one is living in harmony with nature and with the planet. And obviously in the times of great ecological challenges that we're meeting, this dimension of living in harmony with nature and with the planet has become very central, because obviously there will be no happiness if we don't learn to live in harmony with and care for our beautiful, precious, but also fragile planet. So this is what we're speaking about in the context of gross national happiness. When we're speaking about happiness, we are not speaking about superficial pleasures. We're not speaking about instant gratification. We're not speaking about consumption. We are speaking of something very deep, our ability to live in such a way that we manifest our highest potential, our true self, to live in such a way that we really create harmony in our relationship with others, a long-lasting relationship based on trust, respect, love, and friendship, and living and caring for nature and for the planet. And so if we keep that in mind, that's what we're speaking about when we speak about gross national happiness, it makes it easier to understand how our gross national happiness became a new development paradigm. And I would like you to listen to a short interview given by the Prime Minister of Bhutan, who was my boss at the time when I was in Bhutan, who explained in just in a few minutes what for him gross national happiness means.
G&H, or gross national happiness, is the philosophy that had guided Bhutan's development process for about now 40 years. It is based on the belief that development must serve a purpose, that development's role is not simply to promote continuous and limitless economic growth, which is what GDP or the conventional economic models tend to do. And that again, within a finite environment, within a finite world, there are bounds within which growth can take place. Natural, social, resources, and so forth. And so G&H is based on the belief that development must be human-centered, and that its objective must be to create those conditions that will enable the human individual to achieve what is most important to him. And that happens to be happiness. And then again, happiness, we believe, is a condition that can be attained when one is able to balance the needs of the body with those of the mind, the physical and the mental needs being balanced. And likewise, the balance between the spiritual needs of the human individual and the material needs. And so it is a human-centered, holistic, sustainable, and inclusive development approach. Now, more and more people who are dissatisfied with the result of pursuing an economic development that is no longer seen to be sustainable, they are seeing G&H as an alternative development paradigm.
So that was short, but I think very precise summary of what gross national happiness is about. And it started in a very interesting way because the idea of gross national happiness is the brainchild of a very young man that you see in this picture. He was still a teenager when he ascended the throne in 1972, is the fourth king of Bhutan. And his father had passed away. And at that time, Bhutan was still an absolute monarchy. And so the young king would have absolute power, but he was very humble and very wise. And he knew that as a young man, he didn't really know what his role should be. And so he did something quite extraordinary for a leader. And I think many leaders could take that as an example. He went around the country and listened to the people and asked them what they expected from him. And when he then tried to summarize, all what he had heard, he said, well, it's not that easy because, people's expectation might be very different. But what everybody has in common is people want to be happy, want their loved ones to be happy, and want as much as possible to avoid suffering. Therefore, happiness for all the people and well-being for all life forms should be the objective of my government, of my reign. And so that's when the first idea of gross national happiness was born. That was in the early 70s. And for many years, this idea was still very vague, and it took time to find out how do you actually implement that. So it was a gradual process that led to an event in 2011 when the royal government of Bhutan presented at the United Nations a resolution called Happiness and Wellbeing as a new development paradigm. And if you remember, 2008 was the great economic crisis, so-called subprime crisis, where many people started to doubt about the sustainability of the current economic system. And so when in 2011, Bhutan presented the idea of gross national happiness, there was an open ear for that. There was an interest for that. And so the resolution was adopted at the General Assembly. And the then Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, asked the royal government of Bhutan to convene what he called a higher-level summit in New York in 2012. And in order to do that, the Bhutanese government decided they needed to create a gross national happiness center that would coordinate all these efforts. And that's when I was invited to join as the program director of the center. And so my first task was to present GNH in the UN in 2012. And it's also the time where we really tries to formalize all the elements of GNH that already existed, but were not so clearly formalized. Because one of the criticism that we received was, GDP, or gross domestic product, is a measurement tool. And you cannot replace a measurement tool through an ideal or an idea. You have to replace it through a better measurement tool. And of course, we saw that that was valid. And so we convened a year-long working group of international experts to try to formulate in a more coherent way gross national happiness and also the GNH index, which is the measurement tool. Now, I wanted to point out that if you want, there's a kind of something very common between the idea of the threefold social order, the way Rudolf Steiner described it in his work on the social field, on society, where he explained that for a society to be healthy, the three fundamental spheres of the economic system, the political system, and the cultural system have to be working in a harmony, but also independently from one another. I mean, in the right connection. Because now what we experience is that the economic sphere, the economic system, has taken the overhand. And all the other spheres are sort of below the economic sphere. And therefore, economic growth seems to be the only really important thing. And, human resources, natural resources are seen as serving economic growth. And what gross national happiness is saying is that economic development is, of course, important because we need financial resources, material resources, we need services and goods. But the economic development is not a goal, it's a mean to an end. The goal is to increase the quality of life, to create a society where people have a good life. And one of the means is economic development. Another mean is to have a good political system. Another mean is to have technological development, another which belongs to the cultural sphere and so on. But if the economic sphere is dominating and sort of over all the other systems, then it brings very strong imbalance. Same thing if the political system is overshadowing all the others. System. So it's really the balance between these three spheres that creates a healthy social organism. And Rudolf Steiner explained that these three concepts of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity, actually are the values or the motto that belong each one to one sphere. So in the cultural sphere, we need freedom, absolute freedom to be creative, to be able to innovate and so on. In the political sphere and the rights, we need equality, that everyone has the same rights and the same obligations and is submitted to the same laws. Otherwise, it's corruption. And in the economic sphere, we need fraternity because we are sharing limited resources. And the more one person takes, the less, or one organization or one country, the less is left for the others. So fraternity, solidarity should be the principle. And actually, when we look at the threefold social order, there are four pillars. And you see that the three of these four pillars are the same than the threefold social order. So we have cultural resilience in a vital community. This is the cultural sphere. Good governance. This is the political sphere. And sustainable and balanced economic development. This is the economic sphere. But we add a fourth one, which is ecological resilience, that of course, in our time, plays a very central role. So you can see that there's a kind of a alignment between Steiner's idea of threefold social order and the four pillars of gross national happiness. Now we have developed this further to be much more detailed. And this is what we presented at the UN. So we said, if the goal is social happiness here, societal happiness, in order to attain this goal, of course, the needs, the legitimate needs of people have to be met. So all human beings, regardless of the environment in which they live, require adequate satisfaction of their needs for food, water, shelter, security, respect, and so on. But then we have to be aware that human needs are not only material needs, and that's what the Prime Minister was pointing at. We also have emotional needs, we have intellectual needs, we have spiritual needs. And so one of the problems of the current society is that we have focused so much attention on satisfying physical needs that the other more subtle needs, which are at least as important, have been overlooked. So it's about finding a way to satisfy the needs, and not only the physical needs, but within the planetary boundaries. And that's why we have the green light here line here around, where you see that all that is within planetary boundaries. And then in order to do that, we have a holistic development agenda, which is the four pillars that I just discussed. Like the three from the threefold social order plus environment. And then with a responsible use of resources. And then we have the measurement tool, the GNH, Gross National Happiness Index. So because we said gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product or gross national product, and we were told, yes, but you cannot replace a measurement system by an ideal, we developed actual measurement system to measure whether society was developing well. And this 9 domains, so ecological resilience, living standards, health, education, cultural diversity and resilience, community vitality, time use or time balance, good governance, and psychological well-being are the 9 domains that we use to measure the progress of a country, a city, but also a school, a business, an organization, a community. So these A, B, C, and D are the outer structural condition for happiness and well-being. And then we speak about happiness skills, which are the inner dimensions. And there, as it's written there, drawn creatively, both from human historic experience, with wisdom tradition of the world and so on, and modern science. And the whole idea of gross national happiness is to balance the outer and the inner conditions of happiness and well-being. So I won't go in detail now in the 9 domains I just presented so that you see. So we have 9 domains that we measure through surveys. And then for each domain, we have indicators. Let's say for psychological well-being, we have life satisfaction, positive emotion, negative emotion, spirituality. For health, we have mental health, self-reported health status, healthy days, disability, and so on. So we have indicators, and the indicators are a mix of self-reported measurements, or if you want, indicators, and objectively measured indicators. So, which is quite usual in social sciences, where you mix objective, quantitative, and more qualitative data. So that's what we do when we measure GNH. Now, what is really important is to, and Walter was mentioning it very briefly, that without inner transformation, social transformation is not sustainable. Why is it like that? It is because the systems in which we live are neither God-given, might have been in the ancient times, that people experience social system as God-given, like, I don't know, the castes in India in the Vedic time, or the Egyptian society with the pharaoh being like the speaker of God, or in China, the emperor being the son of the heaven or something like that. But in modern times, obviously, no one believes that the social system we live in is a God-given system. Nor is it natural laws. I mean, oftentimes the economists try to pretend that economy is like a natural law, but it's not. It's an ideology, basically. And so, because economic systems are, social systems, economic system, political system, and so on, are neither God-given nor are they natural laws, we understand that they are the product of human collective consciousness. It means they are the product of the way we think, feel, act, relate with one another, relate with our environment, and so on. And so the systems are kind of a manifestation of collective consciousness. Therefore, if we change the system without changing the consciousness that is manifested in the system, that is revealing itself in the system, this change cannot be sustainable. But on the other hand, when we are born into existing systems. Therefore, these systems, they condition us. So it's also not that we can only look at the inner dimension and disregard the systems, because we are constantly conditioned by the systems, educational system, political system, economic system, culture, and so on. So if we only focus on the inner without changing the structural, the systemic dimension, is very difficult to bring about real transformation. But if we only look at social transformation, structural political transformation, without inner transformation, these changes remain very superficial and shallow. So that's the reason why we emphasize the balance between inner transformation and social change. Now, in Bhutan, gross national happiness was developed within the context of a Buddhist country. It's one of the few countries of Asia that was never colonized, and therefore its Buddhist tradition is still very intact. And the inner dimension was relatively easy to, for the people to grasp. But of course, as soon as we go beyond the borders of Bhutan, for instance, presenting it at the UN, or now implementing it in Switzerland or Germany, we need to do it in such a way that it is not connected one specific tradition and of course, even less to a religion, because in the West, for instance, we live in a secular world for good reasons. Education is secular. And if gross national happiness was perceived as being advocating for a specific religion or a specific spiritual tradition, it could not be accepted. And obviously in the UN, where you have all the countries in the world, represented, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, and all the rest, and then many, many secular countries, it would not be possible to present gross national happiness in a religious form. Yet, we really wanted to emphasize the fact that without inner transformation, it would not be sustainable. And so we really worked together with a lot of scientists to and now, because of the development of neuroscience, positive psychology, and more, we have a lot of scientific evidence to explain why we need certain inner practices to transform consciousness. So one of our colleagues was Professor Dr. Tanja Singer from Germany, who did a lot of research within the Max Planck Institute on the effect of meditation, mindfulness, and so on the brain, on the mind, on the health, and so on. And so she was one of the experts that was helping us with providing scientific evidence why practices such as meditation, mindfulness, and so on were very important to bring about this change. And so this is, one of the definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness means paying attention on purpose, means intentionally. So it means that we can align our attention with our intention intentionally. So it needs a certain concentration. Non-judgmentally. So it's not right away reacting. I agree, I don't agree. I like it, I don't like it. It's beautiful, it's ugly. But really just perceiving what is in a phenomenological way and in the present moment. So focusing on what is in the here and the now. So these are the kind of practices that we developed with a lot of good scientific evidence-based proof, so that we could bring it in very secular contexts such as public schools and businesses and so on. And the other dimension that we worked on was based on Daniel Goleman's work. Daniel Goleman is a well-known American psychologist, very known for the development of so-called emotional intelligence. You see, both Tanya Singer and Daniel Goleman have been presenting the founding of their research internationally on the highest international forums. Here it's at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And emotional intelligence or social emotional learning has 5 main components. The first one, the yellow one up here, is self-management. You could call it self-knowledge. So the ability to understand ourselves, including our emotions. So self-knowledge. And managing emotion means both knowing how to deal with difficult emotion and transform them, like depression, sadness, anger, jealousy, and how do we deal with difficult emotions? And how do we learn to cultivate consciously positive states of mind, such as gratitude, kindness, compassion, generosity, and so on. So it's really a path of self-transformation. Self-awareness leads to self-management. Sorry, I started here, but it should start here. Self-awareness is the first, leads to self-management. So these two are the foundation of self-care. Right? Self-awareness, recognizing, knowing one's strengths, weaknesses, and so on, and then knowing how to transform and manage our emotions. These are the first 2 ones. So self-awareness and self-management. So that's emotional learning and self-knowledge. And the second field is social learning. So social awareness, showing understanding, empathy for others. So we know from research that empathy is a natural skill that all human beings are born with, the ability to feel what other people are feeling. And you can observe it already in a newborn child, how the newborn child is able to connect with their primary caregiver, usually the mother, but it can be someone else, in such a way that the child instinctively feels what the mother or the other primary caregiver is feeling and adjust their behavior to what the caregiver is feeling. And conversely, the caregiver, in this case, oftentimes the mother, can also instinctively feel what the baby is feeling at an age where the baby is totally unable to express in words or otherwise, how they feel. So the baby is crying, and at first one doesn't really know why, but very soon you will observe that the young mother can differentiate between the baby cries because it has maybe stomach pain, or it cries because there's another kind of unease, and so on and so forth. So this intuitive connection between human beings is possible because we have something in our brain that is called mirror neurons. So our brain is equipped, if you want, with a biological capability to perceive other people's experiences. But this can be developed much further. And if we cultivate it consciously, it enables us to create social awareness. So listening skills and our ability to not only understand what other people feel, but also, for instance, understand other people's ideas, even if their opinion are different from mine. So there's a emotional empathy, but there's also a cognitive empathy. And that leads to relationship skills, forming positive relationship, working in teams, dealing with conflict, and so on. And we've seen, that that it's one of the components of happiness to know how to develop healthy, respectful, trustful, long-lasting, good human relationships. And so our basic message is that, self-care, care for others, care for the planet. In other words, happiness is based on skills, and skills can be taught and can be learned. So happiness is a skill, therefore it can be learned. And the final is responsible decision making and making ethical, constructive choices about personal and social behavior has a lot to do with our respect for the planet. For instance, if most of mankind would do responsible decision making, we would not be destroying our planet. So these are the 5 components of social emotional learning. And so mindfulness and social emotional learning are so the fundament of the secular learning inner development process that we offer to schools and businesses when we work with them on gross national happiness as the necessary inner dimension of transformation. And the goal is really to move from ego consciousness in the terms of egocentric, right? So putting me, myself, and I at the center, putting the human at the top, and putting most of the time the male on top of all the others, to a ecosystem awareness that although as humans we have a specific role, we are part of a larger whole. And if we are destroying the larger whole, if we don't find our rightful place in the larger whole, even as humans, we cannot thrive and develop. So the shift from ego-centered system awareness to eco-centered system awareness. So that's, if you want, the theory of it. That's the framework. That's what we're working with, the balancing inner and outer transformation. And now I would like to give you a few examples of how we have practically implemented that. And I will share just 2 fields. We have been working also in other fields, but I will share 2 fields that I feel are very important. One is the field of business, because the economic system is a big part of the problem in our time. And so businesses are a part of the problem. So if we cannot transform the way we do business, it's very difficult to bring about social transformation. And so we have been working with businesses now for 5 or 6 years. And interestingly enough, we found quite a lot of businesses who were very interested to implement the framework of gross national happiness within their company. The first business we worked with was in Thailand. I don't remember if we have some Thai participants here in the group. If we have, you've all heard of B. Grimm, because B. Grimm is a very well-known company in Thailand. They are a big energy company, but also they work in the field of transport. They, the SkyTrain from airport to Bangkok, they were part of developing that, and many infrastructure projects and so on. Another example is Eileen Fisher in the US. Eileen Fisher is a fashion company, and fashion is one of the big polluter of the world. So it was really interesting for us to work with an American fashion company. Beatis, I will speak in more details. It's the largest shoe company in Vietnam with over 10,000 employees. And SIG in Switzerland is a company we're currently working with. It means Service Industriel de Genève. It's the company, it's a semi-private, so it's semi-public, belonging to the city and the canton of Geneva, and semi-private, that is providing water, internet, electricity, waste management for the province of Geneva. So these are 4 examples. So Big Grimm was actually the first company we worked with. And what we did was we redefined together with them their vision, mission, values, and behaviors that they wanted to implement in the company. And so that was the new vision that they formulated: doing business with compassion. You see, they wrote compassion very big, for the development of civilization in harmony with nature. And there you see the 3 components of happiness, right? Compassion is in inner attitude. For the development of civilization is service to society. In harmony with nature is, well, in harmony with ecology. So doing business in the context of these 3 components of happiness. This was that was in 2016, so it's quite a long time ago. This was the senior management team of Buddhist. The Western-looking gentleman here is Harald Ling, the CEO of Buddhist. It's a very interesting story. It's a German family who moved to Thailand in the early 20th century. So they've been in Thailand for more than 100 years. And they are Thai. He looks German and his daughter also looks Western, but they are Thai nationals. And they are the owner of this company. Now the company in the meantime has become public, but at that time it was still a family company, multi-billion company. And these are all the senior management. So it was the executive G&H retreat where we worked with the senior management to develop this vision, mission, values, and behaviors. And when we defined with them the indicators to measure the progress of their company, and it's been working very well, and it's been also successful, very, very successful economically. So that was, for instance, important to show that implementing gross national happiness doesn't mean that the company cannot be economically successful anymore. So just a few pictures where you see the senior management having mindfulness moment before having in-depth conversation where they're practicing listening skills and sharing from the heart and really meeting as human beings and not just as professionals. And this then became a regular practice in all their meetings. Here you see just a regular factory meeting or managed meeting in a factory where all the staff starts with a moment of meditation and with sharing deeply before they start going into the work process. And even they even introduced that with the blue collars in the factories, so that really a completely different culture was implemented in their overall business. And so that's a very interesting example. For us, it was really a learning by doing, because in Bhutan, we didn't have big companies like that. So what we had done in Bhutan was a much smaller scale, and it was quite challenging for us to learn to implement that in a very large company, you know. And another example is Buddhist. It's a family business that started in 1982. They have over 10,000 staff. They are producing 25 million pair of shoes annually. They have 1,500 shops. They are in 40 countries. And with them, we also did that. We worked on their vision, mission. But what we did a lot with them is use the G&H index. So you see the 9 domains that we've seen before that is used to measure the development of a country can also be used to measure the development of an organization. And so you see they compared what they did in 2019 and what they did in 2021. And you see there's a lot of progress, although there was the COVID crisis. And the company had, lost 40% revenue within a few weeks when everything shut down, like factories shut down, shops shut down. And luckily enough, they had already been working with implementing gross national happiness. And so they were prepared to meet a crisis like the COVID crisis, because I spoke with Cindy, the CEO of Buddhist, when the lockdown first started. And I asked her, so what are you going to do with this terrible situation where you're losing so much money? And and she said, the first thing, I will not fire a single person, because as CEO, I feel responsible for the well-being of 10,000 families. So you see, that's a mindset that we would like to see in all leaders, right? That her main concern was not, let's fire a lot of people so that I can maintain my revenue or my profit. But her main concern was truly the well-being of her people. Second step was she asked all the senior management who was willing on a completely voluntary basis, they didn't have to follow any rule, to reduce voluntarily their income so that they could provide more income to those with the lowest income in the company. And almost every senior manager agreed to reduce their income by 20, even 30% and redistribute this money to balance the lack of income so that they could guarantee income to the more lower income part of the factory. Beyond that, they have big factory kitchen because they are feeding their employees in their factories. But the factory were closed, so they didn't have meals to provide to the employees. But they kept the factory kitchen open, and they distributed these meals for free in the cities where the factories were. Because in Vietnam we don't have such a good, unemployment insurance, and so when the people were out of work, they had nothing to eat really. And so, they contributed, although they were losing money, they were like extremely generous and giving away free meals, also equipping hospitals and so on. Now, when the lockdown stopped, on day one, they could start all the shops, all the factories right away again, because they had not fired anyone and because all the employees felt very grateful and engaged because they felt, oh yes, our company is really trying to do something good. They really care for our well-being and for the well-being of society. And so now in 2022, now we are 23, but already in 2022, the revenue of the company is better than it was before the pandemic. So you see, it made a lot of sense from a human point of view, from an ethical point of view, but it also even made sense from an economic point of view, because many of the companies who have fired many people during the pandemic now find it extremely difficult to recruit people. They don't have enough people. So just to give you an example how cross-national happiness implemented in business is not just a nice idea, but really has consequences. And that was the ceremony where we awarded cross-national happiness certificate to the company. So it's the first cross-national happiness certified company in Vietnam. The lady next to me here with the brown skirt is BT's CEO, Cindy Vu. So you see, she's a relatively young person, but she's in charge of this big company and does it wonderfully. So these are examples from the business world. Now, I would like to share a few examples from the field of education. So we worked with university in Vietnam, with professional schools in Thailand. One of the main programs is the Happy Schools in Vietnam. I will say a few words about that. So implementing cross-national happiness in education. We also have a program in Switzerland, Happy Schools in Switzerland. We have university programs in two universities. One is in Geneva Management School. It's a one-year-long certificate of advanced study called Happiness in Organizations. And until last year, we had one in Osnabrück in northern Germany, actually not exactly Western Germany more, called Die Gestaltungskraft des Glücks. So the formative power of happiness, more or less also a year-long ongoing program. And then we have the Peaceful Bamboo Family in Vietnam, which is the first Camphill community in Vietnam where we applied cross-national happiness principles in our community. So let me show you a few pictures. This is our Peaceful Bamboo Family community in Vietnam. We were inspired by Camphill communities. As I mentioned, I used to live and work together with my wife and my children for many years in Camphill in Switzerland. And the first field where we worked in Vietnam was the field of special education. But it was very clear for us that we didn't want simply to import what we had experienced in Switzerland into Vietnam and create a kind of a copy of a Swiss community in Vietnam. We wanted to build the Camphill community in Vietnam really based on Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese context, and so on. And so that was really important for us to try to redesign our community based on Vietnamese context, Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese values, but inspired by what we had learned and experienced in in Switzerland and in other Camphills in Europe. So that's just an image of our community. That was in 2018. We were celebrating the 20 years of our activities in Vietnam. And so here you have an image of our community. That's just that you see what it looks like. That's like when you enter, there's a big sort of entry, and then there are workshops. We have a tea house, and this is the main yard, and this is the dining hall that is outdoors, and then we have on the first floor, this is where the young people sleep and so on. So it's a very beautiful also. We have also the first biodynamic garden in Vietnam, and it's been very successful. And we offer biodynamic courses every year in our community. And this is what we call the sharing from the heart. So those of you who know Camphill know that in Camphill there is what is called Bible evening every Saturday evening in Camphill. And so we recreated something inspired by Bible evening, but in a non-Christian context. And we call it sharing from the heart. So the whole community gathers together, and it's a moment where people can really we have a moment of mindfulness, and then we read some inspiring texts from various authors. And it's a moment where everyone, youngsters, teachers, whoever is there, parents, can share from the heart and feel listened to, and strengthen the community experience. And that's every Thursday evening. And that's a very precious moment in our community. Yeah, and that's we have every morning a morning circle, and so that's before the morning. I was standing on the balcony, and they were going to go into the morning circle, and everybody was greeting me. So in our Peaceful Bamboo family, we have tried to bring together the concept of no, it's not true. It was not me taking a photograph because I'm here, so someone else took the photograph. I don't remember who. We brought together what we had learned from our experience in Camphill, which is very much based on the threefold social order, together with gross national happiness, and also the specific Vietnamese context and culture. And so the community is very successful, is constantly growing and developing. And we have a professional training workshop. And if you know anything about Camphill villages or special schools anywhere in the world, you know that one of the big challenges is how to finance it, because it's very difficult to find the finance to do that. And in Europe, it's mainly the states that's paying for it. And so in Vietnam, we don't get any state support. And so we do have to do some fundraising, but amazingly enough, the community is able to self-generate over half of their needs yearly through the product of a workshop, through facilitating training courses, through the biodynamic garden, and it's increasing. So it's a community that is going towards being financially sustainable, which is quite unique in the field of social therapy. So that's the Peaceful Bamboo family. If you ever come to Vietnam, please come and visit us. Briefly I mentioned the university courses. So that's the Certificate of Advanced Study from the Management School in Geneva. Bonheur dans les organisations means happiness in organizations. It's a one-year course. These are some of the participants. That's the German course. This is the Swiss course. So these are all professionals that are working in organizations, in business, in schools, in public service, and that do this ongoing training to bring gross national happiness in their organization, in their schools or in their business. And it's already the 5th course in Switzerland, and that's going very, very well. And then Happy School is, in a way, our pet project. We developed it over the past 5 years. So it was really trying to bring the fundamental principles of gross national happiness, of happiness skills within public schools. So there is a growing world of movement now in Vietnam, and of course that's wonderful, but was really my intention was to bring some of the fundamental pedagogical principles in the overall educational system, because Vietnam is a big country. We have 100 million inhabitants, and we have about over 20 million kids in the schools. And I really felt, how can we contribute to these 20 million schools, children, and not just for a happy few. So together with my team, we developed a teachers training curriculum called Happy Schools in Vietnam. And we did that in collaboration with the Department of Education. And we had a pilot project in one province. And it has attracted a lot of interest also on the national level. Last year, we had a conference for 400 plus school directors in Da Nang in central Vietnam that came from all the provinces in Vietnam to learn more about it. And we're in the process of scaling up this project together with the support of the Ministry of Education. And so, again, the three fundamental modules are based on these three dimensions: self-care, care for others and society, and care for environment and the planet. And this is a nice little picture of Vietnamese students in a regular, public school, primary school. They are wearing the little red scarf because it's a communist country. The kids belong to the young pioneers, but they are practicing mindfulness in the school. Yeah. But we also do that in Switzerland, in Germany. This is a gymnasium in Germany, so a secondary school in Germany. And this teacher in the wheelchair, she did with us the course in Germany, and she brought the mindfulness practices in the gymnasium. And we also implement it now in Switzerland. And again, also, especially after the COVID, where people realized that the mental well-being of young people, adolescents, and children was very important, but also very challenged. Our program of Happy School has gained a lot of interest in many countries. So, and then to conclude, just a word, if you want to learn more about it, this is the last book I published on this theme, A Culture of Happiness. It was published in the US, but I guess you can get it pretty much everywhere. You can order it online, where you can find much more detailed explanation of the aspects that I developed briefly today. And I would like to end with a question. What means happiness for you at work, in your family, and in society? So thank you very much for listening patiently to my long presentation. And we have a moment now for sharing or asking questions or whatever you feel like doing. I don't know if, Walter, will you be moderating maybe? It's helpful to have a moderator.
If needed, I will moderate. We're not so many, so we can see. But I would suggest, inspired by your wonderful contribution, let's take a minute of mindfulness practice. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm full of gratitude for what we have heard in the last hour or so, and invite everyone to share, to ask questions, give feedback, please. Well, I can share, I will take the moment to share a bit of information then. Dr. To already mentioned the wonderful Cindy Wu, CEO of Buddhist, 10,000 co-workers. We're happy to have her in exactly 3 weeks from today, also in a similar event. I've heard her one time and was in touch with her for some time. Yeah, we're very honored to have her, and in the invitation for this event, that Zoom link is already there, but I'll still send out another invite, especially for that event too. So please go ahead.
I have a question. And this made me very naive. Dr. To, if I were to say, okay, I'm hearing it for the first time, just, you know, I'm hearing it, for example, for the first time, and I belong to a small NGO, and we work with farmers, where do I begin to actually move in the direction of bringing in these concepts? How do I start? I mean, is there a protocol you're using, or do I just bring in the mindfulness that I'm already practicing myself, and share it with the workers we have, the co-workers?
So I think there's two aspects to it. One is, do you want to implement it with your beneficiaries, so the farmers, you know, and do you want to implement it within your company or within your NGO? So I think the two aspects are complementary, because if you want to implement it with your beneficiaries or your clients or whatever it is, of course, this culture has to live also within your own company. Otherwise, it's not credible, right? And I think that's been often the case, and the problem with humanitarian NGOs or humanitarian, or, you know, that we have wonderful principles towards the beneficiaries, but the way we treat our own people is not always so good. So I think it's really important to have a balance between the culture we have internally and the culture we want to promote in the world. Right. So there's various entry points. One entry point is to use the index, so the survey, being it within your company or with your beneficiaries, to identify. And so in my book, it's described how you use the survey to identify where are the areas where it's already going well, and we can then reinforce that. And what are the areas that needs more attention because it's not so it's weaker, right? So that's an interesting starting point, to make a kind of a survey, to have the situation as it is, which then will help you to set objectives. Where do you want to move on from there? So that's has to do more with the structural dimension. And then the inner dimension is, you know, what are the happiness skills, so quote unquote happiness skills, that we really need to be able to do our work in a sustainable way. Because one of the problems that I've observed in many NGOs and many humanitarian work, many care workers, is the the danger to burnout, right? One is exposed to a lot of suffering or problems, and then one is so, wants to do so much, and then it gets too much, and people can really burn out and be very stressed. And so I think taking good care of the health, the mental health, the well-being of people in the field of care, the field of education, the field of development work is very, very important, because we can only give as much as we have, right? If we are exhausted and burned out, how is it that we are really going to be helpful to others? So this balance, you see, between looking at what are the structural elements that we can improve, being it within our own organization or with our beneficiaries, and really putting a strong attention to the well-being of our people internally, so that it can be a sustainable work and people don't exhaust themselves by wanting to change the world or help everyone, but then don't have any energy left and are exhausted. So these are two possible entry points.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. By the way, thank you for the sharing. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question by Fu Aitin from Malaysia. It's in the chat box. He says, may I know how are we going to adopt this in our banking and financial system? So I'm not sure if, that's how it reads in the financial and banking system.
So I have to be very honest. I have not much with banks so far. I did work a little bit with the GLS Bank in Germany. It's a bank inspired by anthroposophic principles. And I think a bank like GLS Bank or also Triodos Bank are working pretty much in a similar direction. So I think there are already experiments done, or not more than experiments, really practices of what is a healthy banking system that is really there to support the well-being of society rather than making profit on the, without taking into consideration the well-being of society. So I live in Switzerland, we have a lot of banks here and regular banking scandals. Credit Suisse was the last one. And so we are very aware of the necessity to bring a bit of ethics and mindfulness in the banking system. But to be frank, I have not done much of it, so I cannot really speak out of my own experience, but I would encourage you to look at what these alternative banks like GLS Bank and Triodos Bank, and also Katrin Käufer. She's the wife of Otto Scharmer. I don't know if you are familiar with Otto Scharmer. He's also comes from an anthroposophical background. He developed the so-called Theory U principles that we also use in our work. And his wife, Katrin Käufer, she has done a lot of work on money and banking. So she's a very interesting resource for people who want to develop a project that go in this direction in the field of banking.
We have some teachers here from the Philippines, and I have actually for several years tried to get in touch with the ELI in order to find, how maybe the Happy Schools approach could be implemented here in the Philippines. What would you suggest? How to start? Would we need to find a school or a school director who is open for that, or what are possibilities?
Here's Jim Sharman raising his hand anyway already.
Yeah, wait, maybe first this question. Thank you. Thank you very much. But
yeah, so I'm not sure how to generalize it. In our case, I'll just share with you what happened practically in our case. So what we did was we started in the field of special education, right? Because that was the field I was coming from with the Camphill. And we found a very open door for special education because in Vietnam, there was very little offered in the field of special education. There was a lot of need. We came after the war. A lot of children had been victims or indirect victims of war. And so there was a lot of needs and very little resources, very little know-how, very little. So that was for us the door, what opened the door that we came from the field of special education. And in special education, we were very free because, special education is not something threatening for the government. I mean, they're happy if somebody takes care of it, right? So that was sort of easy, although it's a communist government that, and they have quite a strong hand on education. Special ed was very easy. Very easy is not true, but easy enough. And so we built up relationship over years. And that's always the secret. We didn't come and tell them, okay, we're going to tell you what to do, but we really worked on the ground with the children who needed help. And they saw, because we did it over a long time, that we were reliable partners, that we didn't have any hidden motivation, that we were really, saying what we were doing and doing what we were saying. And it created a relationship of trust. And therefore, it came from them. They asked us, well, you're doing interesting things in the field of special education. Do you think some of it could be also used in the general schools? Because we are having a lot of problems in the general schools. So it was answering their requests. So we were not trying to impose our ideas, but we were answering to their requests. Therefore, it was quite easy. And what we did is we found 9 pilot schools in one province, 3 primary, 3 lower secondary, 3 higher secondary. So we had 9 pilot schools. And we asked the University of Hue, the pedagogical university of this province, to supervise the project so that we would get a third-party assessment from an objective scientific perspective, not us saying how good, how great it is, what we're doing, look, but having somebody from outside really assessing us. And we were confident that we could afford to do that. And it did work very well, and the assessment has been very positive. And that gave a very strong credibility because it was, again, not us trying to prove that, look how great we are, but it was like an objective observer, an academic objective observer saying, oh, yes, we can measure that those children who follow this program, their well-being has increased and so on and so forth. And then during the pandemic, that was very strong because those children who had gone through our program really fared much better than their peers who had not. And so that created a sort of a buzz, around Happy School. And therefore now the idea is to try to scale it up at national level. It will go step by step, but that's, what the request that came towards us. Again, it's not us that try to. So I think to summarize that is like, what is really important is to create good, trusting relationship with those people who matter. Like officials and so on, and not to sort of do it in a corner, a little bit hidden, afraid of what people will, but really to be very transparent and open with what we do, what we've always tried to do. And, and so that then it's something that is built on trust and respect, not on trying to convince, And for us, it has worked very well in Vietnam. And in Switzerland, it was quite similar. It was teachers. In Vietnam, it was more like school authorities. It was not really teachers. It was like a Department of Education, school directors. And in Switzerland, it was teachers who I gave talks on Happy Schools, and then teachers came and, and asked, oh, could we try it out in our school? And so that's how it started. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Jim Sharman, time for you.
I'm trying to quickly recapture the 4 questions that I had for Dr. To, and I'm writing them down. And the 4th one, I was so busy listening that it'll have to come to me. Yeah, I also want to express gratitude for your sharing. It's interesting because I teach in a high school, a Waldorf high school, and the course I teach is Power and Poverty, and I do one whole module on gross national happiness. So, but you know, to share it as a kind of an academic idea is so much different from a lived experience. So, you know, you just bring the ideas to life, and you know, your sharing of the application, I think, is what makes it so powerful. But the inner experience I had while listening to you was that I just felt like, my goodness, everyone needs to hear this. And I don't have access to everyone, but while listening, I was thinking that this would be something I would love to share with our senior high school students. So I will talk to Walter about accessing the recording after this talk. But I have two other questions. One is, it seems like such a powerful idea that answers so many questions of our times that I'm wondering, based on the successes that you've already shared, can you share with us perhaps what is in the pipeline for you? Are there other companies knocking at your door to have you help them navigate this in their own corporations? What I would love to hear what the cutting edge is for you in terms of the next steps and where you see your work going. That's one question. The second is a little bit more personal for me as a school director. You mentioned the issue of burnout, and I would love to explore this idea with you in terms of, maybe not in this forum, but if there's a possibility to hear from you about programs or activities that you may have done that would, say, be specific for teachers, and how can they develop resilience in the face of this, you know, this degree of burnout, especially as a Waldorf teacher, as you said, trying to save the world. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Camphill. Where are you based?
I'm in the Philippines.
In the Philippines. Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the first question was about what's in the pipeline. So yeah, so I'll be going back to Vietnam in 3 weeks' time. I'm in Switzerland right now. We have 2 more companies in the pipeline and that we are going to start implementing with them. One is Mainetti. It's an originally Italian company, but they are all over the world. They are producing, I don't know exactly, you know, like for transport and I don't know. It's just like industrial production to make it simple. So anyway, so that's one company we're working with. And the other one is IDP, which is International Dairy Products. So it's a dairy product company. And so it's also a very large company. And so we are also starting with them. And the interesting thing is that through working with these companies, we are able to fund the Happy School project independently. So we don't need any, state support, or we don't need to look for a lot of sponsors or something like that, because, and that's one of the fundamental ideas of threefold social order, that there should be this connection between economic world and cultural world. And this we already have now. So when we started, we had to to find money with like foundations in Europe or something like that to be able to do our work in Vietnam. And now we don't anymore. We're actually almost all the money we are using for Happy School development is funded by companies who are working with. It's sort of, their contribution to our work because they appreciate the work we're doing with them. So they gladly, contribute as part of their CSR activities or corporate social responsibility activities. They are like sponsoring our work. So that I think that's a really important and precious move, to become independent financially and not having to, work, depend on generous donors, kind of philanthropy kind of thing. But it's more like, they acknowledge that they get something for it, so they're happy to support us. So that's one thing. So we have several companies in the pipeline. The other thing is we are having a Happy School Symposium in April in Vietnam, April 3 to 6, where we're bringing together a representative of science. So, cutting edge scientists have been researching this field, international and Vietnamese, and then practitioners and also political decision makers. So we will have, for instance, the head of education for OECD. He's the guy who's in charge of PISA, the PISA measurement that I was always very sort of critical of. And I met him. He's a German called Andreas Schleicher, and he's actually a great guy, and it's interesting to see, but it's sort of anyway. So he will be speaking. We have the head of education of UNESCO, who is based in Geneva, who will also be speaking, and hopefully the Minister of Education of Vietnam will be. We're still in the process of trying to convince him to join. So we'll have also political decision makers coming. So that's another big project we're working on. And another one, what's really I'm very passionate about, is we are working together with investors and with local authorities to create a happy village. So in central Vietnam, there's one town that is very famous. It's called Hoi An, because it's one of the most scenic towns in Vietnam with fantastic architecture for many centuries and so on. And one part of this province is not well developed. It's called Cam Kinh. It's like half island. It's like it, and the local authority wants to develop this area much more, and they found an investor who was willing to invest there, and it was actually the investor. The investor. The book that I showed you, the Happiness Culture, also exists in Vietnamese. It was published in Vietnamese. Actually, before it was published in English, it was already published in Vietnamese. And he read the book and he was very interested. And then he came with the idea, could we not create a happy village? And so we're working together with the investor and with the local authorities to rethink the concept of village. And I think that's, for me, very, very important, because a lot of the problems we find all over the world, and also especially in Asia, is this rural-urban migration. And then people end up living in, slums in the huge cities with really poor life quality, while in the countryside, the life quality could have been much better, but it was not developed adequately, and young people don't find a job and so on. But I think that now with the modern technology and with the development, it is possible to recreate a new village life, which doesn't mean going back to the way our grandparents lived, but rethink what village life could be. And that's what we're trying to prototype in Cam Kinh village, a village that would really focus on what are the conditions of well-being for the people living there. So right now, 5,000 people live there. And the plan is to have 5,000 new people coming in, but to integrate the two communities, in a way that it's not like you have 5,000 villages and then 5,000 rich people using the villages as their servants, something like that, but really creating one community where everybody is working together towards, a good life. And that includes, wellness architecture. How do you build houses that are conducive for well-being? How do you create landscape design that is conducive well-being? How do you create the way people move in the village so that, you know, people meet and there's greenery and so on and so forth. So that's a project I'm very passionate about. It's just in the beginning phase, but I think if we could manage to create a happy village as a kind of a model and show that it's possible to renew village life in a way that is sustainable, that is ecological, and where there's enough, you know, education and culture and all the rest of it, that could really be very significant. So yeah, these are some of the projects I'm working on. And to your second question, well, basically that's what Happy School Teacher Training Program is about. Exactly that, you know, how do you give the teachers the necessary tools first for themselves so that then they can implement it in the classroom. So basically it would be, you know, having teachers going through the Happy School Teacher Training Program. It would answer the question. Yeah. Thank you for the questions. Bella.
Yes, it's related to the teacher training, no, for the Happy School. What is the duration of the training? And is there like a possibility of like an intensive short course that would give an overview of the teacher training? I mean, if we have limited time and resources.
That Belia and I can join. Yeah. And Jim.
Yeah. And if it's also like, do you travel? Like, you know, we can organize something in the Philippines. It depends really on conditions.
Yeah, so my own availability is, to be honest, very, very limited because I'm, you know, yeah, I have a lot of programs that are already running, so you know I really cannot promise to come to the Philippines, unfortunately. But the course, the normal course is it's 3 modules. Each module is not so long; it's about three to 4 days. So what we do is that until now we did it like that we bring the teachers together for 3 days. And it can be large groups, like the first group was 120 teachers or something like that, you know. So we can facilitate big groups. We're used to that. So we had the teachers coming together for 4 days, learning and practicing together. And then for 1 term, they were implementing it in the classroom, and we would like support them, you know, mentor them and so on. And then they would come back and do the second module. And so the whole program took 1 school year, so 3 trimesters. Right, always coming together, learning, implementing, then looking back, and so that was the process. Now we have started with a hybrid version. So that was the pilot, was like that, and we had a team on the ground going to the classrooms and so on and so forth. Now we have started a hybrid pilot where it's only very few moments of physical presence, and then the rest is online, but we do have some physical presence. And we are working on a fully online version because we obviously cannot scale up if it needs to be physically present, because like in Vietnam, we're speaking about, I'm not sure, but it's maybe 2 or 3 million teachers. So it's a lot of people. If the ministry finally decides, you know, it's still on the process. We have not the final decision yet. I don't want to go too fast, but the idea is scaling up, which means it will become a national program. And obviously, it's no way we can follow up physically. So we are working on the website right now and on the online learning process. So that's, but it's not ready yet. And during the symposium in April in Vietnam, we will launch the website. So it will not be finished, but we will have I think at least module 1 will be already available online. We are starting with the Vietnamese version, but the English version should be following up pretty soon because it's supposed to be internationally available. So that's the bad news is, sorry, I'm not really able to come. The good news is you might be able to join the online version maybe in a year or so.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for tonight's talk. It's very enlightening.
So maybe we should slowly call it Yes, it's been quite a long time we've been together.
I had the same thought. It was like, it sounded like a good closure because there's plans. We can look forward to plans. There's already, it stirred up some activities, some will activity that let's see what comes out of it. I think we have a connection now, yeah, all those who are interested in implementing these things, they can also first write to me, so that maybe here in within the Philippines or also within Asia, we can first come together before we approach then the Eurasia Learning Institute. But of course, you're free to already approach them also directly. Dr. Tho has also talked about the conference. I've also informed some people about that. So you will, Tai, you will still hear from me about that. And yeah, it was an overwhelming evening for us. We'll take that into our dreams. And I kind of believe that something must come out of this. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.